Hello everyone, this is POW Weather. In this update, we've got a barrage of storms coming over the next couple of days with intense rainfall, and flash flooding is a huge concern, plus the overall outlook for the rest of August. And we'll talk about the reasoning of why the tropics are the quietest since 1982. Welcome back, everyone. Good morning out there. How's it going? This is your Wednesday update. So if you are new to the channel and you like detailed weather breakdowns on North America and the tropics, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it this morning and take a look at the last 72 hours of where all the rainfall has been. And there's definitely been a lot of heavy rain that's falling just in the last 3 days. There's been pockets up there by Calgary as well as into Winnipeg. There's also been several systems with these fronts traversing from the northwest down to the southeast. Some kind of beneficial rains in parts of Montana and the Dakotas. We still have that monsoonal flow that's been alive and prevalent down there in El Paso, Tucson, as well as Phoenix area, and even parts of Southern California was able to get into the action and get some beneficial rains. But really, it's been about this cold front and this broad surface low that creeped down towards Oklahoma that kind of helped with the drought situation out there, but really kind of stalled out once it hit the Dallas-Fort Worth area, sent that really flash flooding setup at the second all-time wettest 24-hour in Dallas history down there. But it's been traversing across. It's been a very slow-moving system. Dumped a lot of heavy rain down in Austin and San Antonio. Now it's impacting parts of Louisiana as well as Mississippi, getting into Alabama. There was numerous areas that picked up double-digit rainfalls. These are just in the last 3 days, and then it kind of fishtailed up here and along the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. And once you got back up into Massachusetts, they also had some sporadic reports of 4 to 7 inches of rain. So definitely some beneficial rain, and that actually crept up into Maine. But yeah, 1 to 2 inches really kind of elongated right there into the mid-Atlantic and into the Ohio Valley. But what's happening going forward? So we're still have that little pesky broad surface low to contend with. Now it's actually further off into portions of Louisiana, but especially hanging over Mississippi. But it still has this old frontal boundary elongated down here in San Antonio, down into Houston. They're getting some heavier rains this morning. But up to the north, we've got some heavier storms breaking out along into Montana. And that is going to be traveling southeast over the course of the day. And those could be on the bumpy side once we get into the afternoon with some damaging winds and some larger size hail possibly to contend with. But then it's all about the boundary further to the south where we've got that heavier rain aspect with this just relentless line of storms just going to be inundating these areas. So let's take a look at the setup for today, and this is why the Storm Prediction Center does have that marginal risk for severe storms. It's got the intensity right now. That's going to be getting its act together once we get some daytime heating, and those are going to be bubbling up and intensifying, traversing across down from this northwest flow. So places like into Spokane, into Butte, back into Billings, all the way into Rapid City, back into Valentine, Norfolk, Sioux Falls, those areas are going to be under the gun to seeing some of those stronger storms. Nothing like too serious, but definitely they could be on the stronger side with some 60-mile-per-hour winds later on this afternoon. And some of those could contain some quarter-size hail. But further south, it's all about the heavier rain, right? So right along this boundary, this is why the Weather Prediction Center has got those slight and even moderate risk of flash flooding. So we've seen back-to-back-to-back moderate risk. Fortunately, this broad surface low has moved a little bit, but now it's set up shop over portions of Louisiana, getting into the middle portions of Mississippi, headed into Alabama. That's the main bullseye this afternoon for that just training thunderstorms. I mean, these are just training. They train over the same area because these upper level winds are basically very light up at the top layer of the atmosphere. And then once they come across, there's nothing to move these things. So they tend to form and kind of train like train tracks over the same area. That's why we're seeing those dangerous flash flooding setups. It's the exact same scenario that Dallas saw. That they're seeing a little bit of that down in towards Houston. Now it's really going to be setting up over portions of Mississippi heading into portions of Alabama. But there's the monsoonal flow, and then of course you have some heavier rains where we have some bubble action this morning with some thunderstorms breaking out, and that's going to traverse down from the northwest flow. But overall, going into tomorrow, that I think that just continues because we've been looking at these kind of precipitation water values. These are pretty high for this time of year. Austin, I mean, August is one of your drier months down there, especially for the deep south. And so it's kind of strange to see areas of getting 2, 3, almost 4-inch rainfall rates without a tropical system. So it's almost treating like a tropical system down here that you get. Even some tropical funnels have been reported, and some of those that could happen in this atmosphere with the cloud base. You're only talking 1,000 to 2,000 feet. It doesn't have much room to fall from this rain, and so the rain is just completely, the atmosphere is completely saturated, and that's why we're seeing some of those 2, 3, even upwards to 4-inch rainfall rates potential at times, because there's no cap. All it takes is a little bit of lift, and then you got the Gulf of Mexico to work with, and boom, you got the perfect scenario for a flash flooding setup, and that's what's happening down here into the deep south. But yeah, here's the overall radar for the next 48 hours, and kind of gives you the depiction on where the storms could be. So yes, you have these storms across up here into the Montana and back into the Dakotas regions. That's where they do have that marginal risk for those severe storms. You've got this kind of pop-up diurnal heating type atmosphere, variety thunderstorms with the monsoonal flow over here. And then you have another little trough that's could be digging down into portions of Illinois and Wisconsin, upstate New York, and back into Maine. They're going to be getting some rain over the next 2 days. But then further to the south, of course, it's all about that stalled frontal boundary and that broad surface low. And you can definitely see it's over Louisiana and Mississippi today, but it's still close enough where you get that wraparound moisture on the backside, about a 20 to 30% chance of seeing some showers in the heat of the day, say in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then further to the south, it's all about the sea breeze down there further to the south, where you get these little, again, bubblies. And if you live down in Florida, you know what I'm talking about. It, 3, 4 o'clock, boom, atmosphere pops up. You get a storm for 20 minutes and boom, it settles back down. It kind of rains itself out. That's what's happening down there. But once we get into Saturday, things kind of relax a little bit, right? I mean, that thing kind of, that broad surface low finally just loses its punch and washes itself out. So we still got 2 days to contend with that broad surface low. But once we head into the weekend, I think that's just going to be kind of fizzling out. And it's going to leave a lot of rainfall in its wake and a lot of flooding between now and then. But yeah, once we get into Saturday, we won't be having any flash flooding setups, as this will be just kind of more or less scattered activity. But we are going to be watching another front, right? So we have another front digging down to the midsection of the country, right along this boundary in northern Oklahoma and Kansas, back into Iowa, back into Minnesota, even into portions of getting here into Wisconsin. They're going to be getting some rain showers along this boundary, and that will just traverse across off to the east, heading into your Sunday time frame, where they could be seeing some heavier activity shift into northern parts of Oklahoma, getting into eastern parts of Kansas, headed into northwestern portions of Missouri, and then headed into Iowa and northern Illinois, and then eventually headed into some heavier activity once we head up into Wisconsin. Well, again, we still have that little boundary all the way down to the south. It's still going to be ringing some sporadic showers, mainly that diurnal heating type atmosphere activity once you get into the heat of the day. But let's head up north, right? So let's head up to the teleconnections, where basically everything starts. So you always have to look at the atmosphere from the top down, right? So this is just an example on how this works. So this is the PNA, which basically stands for the Pacific North American, right? So when you basically see this in a positive phase, which it has been, that pretty much promotes ridging, or substance air, drier air, stable air that's very difficult to rain. Usually this depicts warmer conditions when you see this in a positive phase on the west side, your western parts of the US and the Pacific Northwest. But now let's go look at, hey, now it's completely opposite. We see a little dip, right? We see a little dip. Once it actually goes negative, that's actually an indication where it could be like a little trough that's going to be coming into that region, basically saying more unsettled conditions, more cooler conditions. And now we look at the second layer, right? So now let's look at the 500 millibar. That's about 17,000 feet up in the atmosphere. So yeah, see, it looks a little bit different now, right? So we got ridging. You've been dealing with those very warm temperatures the last 6 weeks. I think Portland's been like 47. We're going on 48 days in a row without rain in that region. It's been bone dry for 6 consecutive weeks. So, hey, it's a good sign that we're got a little trough, but you saw it. It's actually not going to be lasting that long. We're talking only a day or two. So it's a quick hit, right? So we get a little bit of a coolness, a little bit of a break from the heat. But it's implying, based on the teleconnections, that it's not going to last very long, right? So now we take it to the next layer, which is the 850 millibars. This is about 5,000 feet up in the atmosphere. Teleconnections say it's negative. Look at right here, and it's hey, all that blue associates, hey, that's possibility of cooler temperatures about 5,000 feet up in the atmosphere. We don't live at 5,000 feet. We live at the surface. So what's happening at the surface? Boom. We got cooler conditions with that negative PNA bringing in, 5, 10 degrees cooler conditions, right? So that's kind of gives you an example how the teleconnections and how you would actually read them from the top down, all the way down to the surface. So going forward, so once we move to Monday timeframe, there's that cold front, right? So we're watching that cold front that's going to be in the midsection of the country. Now that's going to be traversed across in portions of southern Oklahoma. You're going to be getting back in the rain showers again. This is actually towards the end of August. That'll be traversing across portions of Arkansas, headed into Missouri, into southern portions of Illinois, back into Indiana, and then portions of Ohio. That won't be into the day on Monday. So once we get into Tuesday, look at that little swirl, right? We got another little swirly action happening. That's another broad surface low that's indicating to say, hey, we got a little bit more instability in that atmosphere. Along with that cold front, we could have another surface low develop, and that opens the door again. So you got the northwest flow, and that opens the door again for potentially more heavy rain moving back on the compounding with that cold front that's in the midsection of the country by the end of the month. So what we're looking at here is the overall precipitation water content in that region. So we know the Gulf of Mexico is plenty warm, right? So it's been untapped. The tropics have been bone quiet, and I'll go over the reasoning for that here in a little bit. But yeah, by the time we get into the end of the month right here by the August, I mean, Dallas is already at basically your wettest August on record, if you can believe that, after they went 67 days in a row without a drop of rain. It's completely flipped around there. And with that one huge rain event that was basically just a deluge. And but now we could be looking at possibly another heavy rain event to basically add to those totals by the time we even finished August. So, but along this boundary, we're going to be watching the timing of all these aspects coming into play. So here's the end of August. This up here, all that brown shaded area, that indicates more ridging coming back in that region, but it also indicates drier air, right? So we'll be watching the timing of this drier air. And then of course, down here in the Pacific Northwest, where the PNA goes from negative back to positive again, boom, you got the drier air moving back in. You got the warmer conditions moving back in by the end of the month again. But yeah, by the time we get into the second, you're talking back into Friday on September the 2nd time frame. There's that boundary, right? So we start to look down in the Caribbean. So we got a lot of purples showing up. Say, hey, we got a little tropical wave that might sneak underneath here that could be getting into the Cayman Islands area with some very heavy rain by the time we get into that second day of the month. Along this boundary, we'll be watching the timing of all this, because this is indication where we've got a lot of drier air. So anything that may sneak into the Gulf is going to have a hard time pushing further north, and it'll probably push out further off into the southeast. But we'll be watching the timing of all that. But like I mentioned, the PNA is going back positive again. So once we get towards the end of the month, from August 31st to September the 4th, right? We've got more ridging, unfortunately, coming back into play. That basically means hotter conditions are coming back, above average temperatures are coming back, and a lot of sinking air and a lot of drier air is moving back into those regions up here into the Pacific Northwest, getting into, Montana, Idaho, and then lighter heat values once you swing into portions of Utah and Wyoming. But further to the south, right along that boundary with the combination of that cold front and the broad surface low, we've got another potentially heavy rain maker setting up over portions of Oklahoma again, back into Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana, and that will again move, same way with that surface low, just like the last one, slowly shift off into the further east, picking up portions of Mississippi and Alabama by the time we get into the first and second day of September. But why are the tropics so quiet, right? I mean, we haven't had a storm since Colin, right? So in July, we had to contend with all the Saharan dust that basically lasted a longer than usual for July standards. But now that we've gotten into August, we haven't had a storm in 51 days. Today will be day 52. If we look at this, if we look at the 500 millibar relative humidity, it gives you a reason, right? So here's your anomalies from the 1st to the 22nd. Look at all that red. That basically depicts very dry air, right? So you got very dry air, almost off the charts dry air in the main development region, heading into the portions of the Caribbean where you've got a lot of moist air. Well, right off the coast of Africa, those start off as fairly decent waves, but once they hit that dry air, they just fall like a rock. I mean, that just nothing can materialize. So we've had several waves out there. National Hurricane Center puts 20%, say 30%. All of a sudden hits that dry air. It's like boom, down to 10, boom, down to 0. Doesn't make it past that dry air. And you can actually see the dry air has been contending. It subsides a little bit, but it's still going into the Caribbean all the way into Jamaica. But if a wave can make it past that, right? If it can make it past that, it's got smooth sailing once it heads into portions of the southern portions of the Caribbean, especially as you get into the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll be watching this. That's basically the main reason why the tropics have been so quiet as of late. So again, we find ourselves with another storm, right? So it's pretty active. You see a lot of moist air coming off the coast of Africa. That's why we say, hey, the National Hurricane Center's got about a 20% chance of this developing over the next 5 days once this comes off the coast of Africa, right? But we got a lot of dry air to contend with. We have another wave right here over the dry air right now. By the time we get into 5 days, if it can make it past, look, you saw all that dry air to contend with, right? It's going to, for the next 5 days, it's got a tough road. It's got a tough road. But if it's able to make it past here, this wave, then once it gets out into the southern portions of the Caribbean, it's got a lot more potential. It has a lot more legs to contend with. And then, of course, we're heading into, peak season, right? In September. It's going to be hard to go up for the entire month of September without a storm. I mean, it's the quietest in 40 years. So the odds are great we're going to have a storm really soon, right? It's the quietest it's been in 40 consecutive years. So so the odds are really great that a storm is going to be unfolding. But for between now and then, for the next 7 days, here's your rainfall, right? So predominantly it stays pretty much dry, over the Pacific Northwest. It's only subtle hints that when that trough goes negative there for a day or two, we could try to wring out some sporadic rain showers, but it's not much to speak of, right? So predominantly, you're going to be staying dry up here for the next 7 days. But overall, you're going to have these northwest flows set up, sending sporadic, showers and thunderstorms, about 1 to 2, 3 inches, isolated, and then some of these sporadic amounts. But where all the really heavy rain is going to be with where the broad surface of low is right now, and then the combination of that second storm that's coming in by the end of the month, we could be looking at another heavy rain setup, especially along the coastal regions of the deep south, and then more, of course, more beneficial rains for portions of the northeast. So hey, once we get past that, again, that wave, some of the ensemble members are kind of hinting if it does able to make that traverse across, it's only got about a 20% chance right now to form in some sort of tropical entity. So definitely we'll be watching, but it's all about the dry air right now. We got to get rid of that for the storms to kind of light up. We have that wave. It's good possibility it could become a potential storm, but well off, coming off the coast of Africa. But that might not be until 7 or 10 days from now. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on things for you for sure. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.